My name is Stella. I'm standing in the same lawyer's office where, not long ago, the room erupted in laughter at me. Now, it's deathly silent. My father, who once grinned and called my inheritance a pile of junk, is pale and shaken. His lawyer is murmuring about separate counsel, and my uncle, Curtis, is calculating his next move with a flat stare. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was always the quiet one in the family. I worked at the local library, shelving books, helping retirees with their paperwork, and having my lunch at my desk. I liked order, and I believed in following a system to find the truth. My grandfather, Arthur, was a man of precision. He opened Arthur's Auto Parts in 1972 with a small loan and a lot of determination. For decades, it was the go-to place for mechanics and car enthusiasts in the county. But as my father, Victor, and uncle grew up and joined the business, they thought my grandfather was holding them back. They modernized the shop, adding new technology and a credit system. Slowly, they sidelined my grandfather, moving him from the main office to a small corner, and eventually, he retired at home. By the time I was in college, the family narrative was set. Arthur was a good-hearted but poor businessman who let the shop decline. Then, my grandfather passed away. We gathered in the office of Mr. Thompson, a lawyer who had handled our family's business for 25 years. My father sat at the head of the table like a king. My uncle Curtis sat near the window in a crisp suit. His wife, Louise, was constantly on her phone, and my cousins took the best seats. I sat by the door. Mr. Thompson began reading the will. Curtis would keep the operational control of the auto parts store, Victor would get the cash accounts, and my cousins each received a small amount. Then, he reached my name. To my granddaughter, Stella, I leave the old house on Elm Street in $10. The room exploded in laughter. My father leaned back, grinning, and said, "You wasted your time on a broke old man. Now you get a heap of junk." I didn't argue. I smiled, picked up the worn $10 bill, and walked out. But what they didn't know was that my grandfather had spent my childhood teaching me number games. He would hide small treasures around the house and leave me a string of numbers as clues. "Count carefully," he'd say, tapping the paper. It took me a summer to learn his patterns, and after that, I could read him like a map. 2 days after the funeral, I drove to the house on Elm Street. From the outside, it looked like a wreck. The porch was sagging, the paint was peeling, and the windows were dirty. But when I walked in with the key Mr. Thompson had given me, the smell of oil and leather hit me, the exact smell of my grandfather's hands. The inside of the house was a contradiction. Everything was perfectly organized. The books on the shelves were in alphabetical order, the kitchen drawers were labeled, and the closet had clothes arranged by color and style. This was not the home of a man who had given up. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and examined the $10 bill. The serial number seemed familiar. I realized that my grandfather had left me an instruction. I copied the number and broke it down according to the rules he had taught me. It pointed to the workshop behind the house. The workshop was a low-lying building that my grandfather had built himself. Inside, one wall was filled with small wooden drawers, each numbered. I followed the clues and opened a drawer. Under a tray of tools, I found a notebook with a cracked brown spine. As I started reading the notebook, I realized that it wasn't an inventory of the auto parts store. It tracked money leaving accounts, not coming in. Each entry had a date, an amount, and a pair of initials, VC for Victor and CC for Curtis. I took the notebook home and compared it with the official records of the store. The official books showed a healthy business, but my grandfather's private ledger told a different story. Money was being siphoned off through inflated vendor payments and routed to other accounts. Over the next week, I treated the ledger like a research project. I cross-referenced the dates with county business filings, public liens, and the store's vendor list. The pattern was clear. For nearly every legitimate transaction, a small amount was being skimmed off. Curtis came to the house one Sunday, uninvited. He said he was just checking on me, but his eyes were scanning the house, especially towards the workshop. He tried to convince me to sell the house, saying it was full of junk and a liability. I told him I had it handled. After he left, I was certain there was more to find. I found another clue in the ledger that led me to a different drawer. Inside a metal tin, I discovered my grandfather's old federal identification and letters of commendation. It turned out that before opening the auto parts store, he had worked for the government as an auditor, learning to document everything and trust no one's account but his own. There was a name in the margins of the ledger, Mr. Harris, who had managed the local bank before it changed hands. I visited him and showed him the ledger. His face changed, and he told me that my grandfather had known for years what his sons were doing. He had come to Mr. Harris to ensure that when the time came, the evidence would be clean and impossible to dismiss. My grandfather had even chosen the $10 bill himself, finding a serial number that matched the number games he had taught me. He left instructions with the lawyer that the bill should reach me and no one else. Mr. Harris told me that my grandfather left something at the bank, and only the number on the bill could unlock it. Before going to the bank, I found one more hidden drawer. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it and a stack of bank statements. The statements showed unauthorized withdrawals from my grandfather's personal accounts in his final years, with forged signatures. I opened the letter. It was short but powerful. My grandfather apologized for leaving me a fight instead of a gift. He wrote that he knew I was the only one in the family who understood that love was about paying attention. He said the $10 bill was the key to a drawer at the bank, and everything I needed to finish what he'd started was inside. I knew what I had to do. I gathered all the evidence, made copies, and stored them in different places. I called a forensic accountant, Miss Diaz, who had no ties to our family. She was impressed by the organization of the evidence and said my grandfather had done most of her job for her. Ms. Diaz referred me to an estate attorney, Mr. Grant. He explained that while some of the older skimming might fall outside the legal time limits, the recent forged withdrawals were serious enough to pursue. My father found out I'd been to the bank and launched a public shame campaign. He came to the library during story time and accused me of harassing the family and manipulating my dying grandfather. I kept my cool and recorded the incident. Louise found me in the grocery store parking lot, begging me to bury what I'd found. She said she knew about the money but not the full extent. She was worried about her kids. I felt sorry for her, but I couldn't ignore what my grandfather had gone through. My father then came to my apartment, trying to sound like a concerned father. He invoked my mother, family dinners, and said my grandfather was bitter and had poisoned me against them. He repeated that my inheritance was a pile of junk, but this time it was a plea. A week later, I received an invitation to a family meeting at Mr. Thompson's office. They wanted to resolve the estate and get me to sign away the house. I knew it was a trap, but I decided to go. I wanted them to be in the room when the truth came out. The night before the meeting, I prepared a packet of all the evidence. The forensic report, the parallel ledgers, the forged checks, and the letter were all in order. I confirmed that the prosecutor's office had received the referral. In the morning, I walked into the office. My father's lawyer slid a quit-claim deed across the table, saying it was a fair deal. I calmly placed my packet on the table and said, "Before I sign anything, everyone should see what's actually in the junk." I laid out the evidence one by one, explaining how the store's official records didn't match my grandfather's private ledger. The room went silent as I showed the forged checks and explained the financial abuse. My father exploded, shouting that it was all garbage and that I was forging the story. But his lawyer tried to calm him down. Curtis asked where I got the bank records, and Mr. Grant explained that they were lawfully inherited and a referral was already with the prosecutor's office. The word prosecutor hit the room like a bomb. My father sat back, his face drained of color, and stared at the worn $10 bill. The cousins were shocked, and Louise was crying silently. I gathered my documents and said I wouldn't sign the deed. The house wasn't for sale, and the workshop would stay as it was. I walked out of the room, leaving them in silence. The county prosecutor's office opened a review. It was a long process, but my grandfather's careful documentation made it easier. Eventually, my father and uncle faced charges. The auto parts store went into receivership, and the proceeds were used to repay what had been taken. I kept the house on Elm Street. I fixed the porch and the windows, and I left the workshop exactly as my grandfather had built it. I used part of the recovered money to start the Arthur Memorial Fund at the library, teaching reading and financial literacy to those who were told they weren't smart enough. My grandfather's lesson was clear: the quiet ones who count carefully can win the case, and the truth will always prevail, no matter how hard others try to hide it.